You know that feeling when you open a letter and before you even read it, your body already knows it's bad news? A 28-year-old woman gets home from work, kicks off her shoes, grabs the lease renewal off the counter, and opens it standing up. Her rent is going up $185 a month. Not $185 in theory, not $185 in spreadsheet world. In real life, that's her entire emergency fund plan for the year. That's the car repair budget. That's the difference between I can handle one bad week and one flat tire becomes a credit card balance. And the worst part, somewhere in the back of her head, a voice starts whispering, maybe I messed up. Maybe I'm just bad with money. Source. Then the chorus arrives. Financial influencers say it, parents say it, bank websites say it. Keep your housing at 30% of your income and you'll be fine. That number gets treated like gravity, like a law of nature, like if you're struggling, you violated the equation. But here's the thesis of this video. The 30% rule is not timeless wisdom. It is a ghost from another economy. And in the economy you and I actually live in, the rule is mathematically dead. 1. The origin story, the ghost from 1969. Let's strip this rule of its fake authority. The number didn't come down from a mountain, it came from policy. In 1969, Congress passed the Brooke Amendment, which capped what public housing residents were expected to pay. Not the whole country, not every renter, not every market. Public housing. And the original figure was 25% of income, later raised to the 30% standard we still quote today. Then, the Housing and Community Development Amendments of 1981 locked in the assisted housing formula most people now treat like common sense. NLIHC, Congress.gov. So when somebody tells you adults should only spend 30% on rent, what they're really doing is laundering a public housing benchmark from the Nixon era, updated in Reagan's first term, into a universal life rule for everyone in 2026. And look at what that benchmark predates. It predates student debt becoming a national millstone. Treasury now describes the federal student aid portfolio as nearly $1.7 trillion. It predates family employer health coverage rising to $26,993 a year. It predates average new car payments landing in the mid-700s. The economy changed, the rule didn't. U.S. Treasury, KFF, Experian. So no, the rule isn't sacred. It's old. That's different. 2. The Kevin case study, mathematical insolvency. Let me show you how the rule fails in real life. Meet Kevin in Columbus. Kevin makes $48,000 a year. Not rich, not reckless, just normal enough that older generations would still call him a responsible adult with a decent job. He finds a one-bedroom for $1,165 a month. That's basically right on top of the famous rule. Gross monthly income is $4,000, rent is $1,165, so housing is about 29% of his income. Textbook affordable, Gold Star, personal finance approved, Rent Cafe. Now let's do the part nobody on Instagram wants to do, the rest of life math. After taxes and ordinary payroll deductions, let's say Kevin has about $3,060 actually landing in checking each month. Then we build a brutally boring budget. No luxury SUV, no Cabo, no wellness retreat. He drives a used car with a $390 payment, which is actually below the current average used car payment. He spends $170 on car insurance, $230 on gas and maintenance, $450 on groceries, $300 on health insurance and basic medical costs, $450 on student loans, $200 on utilities, $125 on internet and phone, $18 on renter's insurance, and $90 on household basics. Add the rent, and Kevin's bare bones monthly total is $3,588. That leaves him $528 in the hole every single month. Experian, KFF, IRS. That's the punchline. Kevin did the thing. He followed the rule. He found the affordable apartment, and he still can't make the budget work. So Kevin is not bad with money. Kevin is not financially illiterate. Kevin is living inside a broken equation. The rule says he should be fine. The ledger says he's underwater. Believe the ledger.
3. The real villain, RealPage/YieldStar and algorithmic rent setting. Now let's talk about why rents don't feel like normal market competition anymore. A ProPublica investigation found that RealPage's YieldStar software used a huge pool of landlord data, including private information on what nearby competitors charge and even actual lease transaction data, not just advertised asking rents, to recommend rent increases. RealPage itself said the system held lease transaction data for more than 13 million units. Later, the Justice Department sued, alleging that competing landlords were sharing non-public, competitively sensitive data through the platform in a scheme that harmed millions of renters. ProPublica, DOJ. He said leasing agents had too much empathy, as in the humans interacting with tenants were too reluctant to squeeze every last dollar out of them. So the solution was to get pricing off-site, away from the human beings who might hesitate before wrecking somebody's month. ProPublica. Meanwhile, during the pandemic-era rent explosion, national asking rents jumped 17% in March 2022, with some metros like Austin up 38% year over year. And in one RealPage-priced Seattle building highlighted by ProPublica, a tenant saw rent jump 33% in a single year. So when people shrug and say, that's just the market, understand what they're waving away: software-guided pricing built on competitor data, in a housing market where the product is shelter. Redfin, ProPublica. And then there are the junk fees: trash valet, tech fee, pest fee, package fee, pet rent for the crime of your dog existing indoors. The FTC's 2025 final junk fee rule covered live event tickets and short-term lodging like hotels and vacation rentals, not apartments. Only in 2026 did the FTC open a separate proposed rulemaking on rental housing fees. So for years, renters got hit with drip pricing while the biggest federal crackdown stopped short of long-term rental housing. FTC, multi-fee dive, FTC. So if your rent feels less like a price and more like a shakedown, that's because sometimes it is. 4. The middle class split. This is the bigger story. We keep hearing that the middle class is shrinking, but that phrase is too soft. What's really happening is a split between people who already own assets and people who don't. Depending on the survey, around 6 in 10 Americans say they're living paycheck to paycheck. Lending Club's figure cited by Econofact was 62%, while other measurements come in lower depending on the definition. That means the exact percentage is debated, but the reality is not. Financial fragility is widespread. Econofact. At the same time, existing owners are living in a different universe. The CFPB says nearly 60% of active mortgages have rates below 4%, which helps explain the lock-in effect. Owners with cheap debt don't want to move because moving means replacing a low-rate mortgage with a high-rate one. And the census says 39.4% of owner-occupied homes are now owned free and clear. That's the split. One group is paying yesterday's price for housing, the other is bidding in today's market. CFPB, U.S. Census Bureau. Now look at the entry gate. Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies says the national median single-family home price grew to 5 times median household income in 2024. In the 1990s, that ratio was about 3.2. So when younger renters say the median life feels unaffordable, they're not imagining it. Housing moved farther away from income. Harvard JCHS. That is why this feels personal, even though it's structural. You're told to compete in the same market as people who either locked in sub 4% debt, own free and clear, or already have appreciated assets behind them. The middle class didn't just shrink, it split into asset owners and asset chasers. 5. The 2026 window: negotiate or relocate. Here's the good news. The market is not uniformly hopeless, and 2026 gives renters a narrow opening. The U.S. just came through a massive apartment completion wave. NAHB says 608,000 multifamily units were completed in 2024, the highest annual volume since 1986. That supply is still washing through some markets in 2026. Realtor.com's January 2026 rent report showed Austin down 7.3% year over year, Denver down 4.9%, and Phoenix down 4.0%, with softness tied to strong multifamily supply and elevated vacancy. NAHB, Realtor.com. So if you are renewing a lease in 2026, negotiate now. Ask for a flat renewal. Ask them to waive fees. Ask them to match a competing building. Ask for a longer term at the lower rate. Ask for 1 month free spread across the lease. Why? Because the National Apartment Association says the market is already approaching the peak of the supply wave, with completions easing and pricing power expected to strengthen in 2027. This is not leverage forever. This is leverage while it still exists. NAAA. And if your city just won't budge, relocation is not a moral failure either. there are still states where the average one-bedroom is under $1,000, including Oklahoma, Arkansas, West Virginia, North Dakota, Iowa, and South Dakota, and plenty of smaller cities come in much lower than that. If your job is remote or flexible, geography is one of the only financial levers left that can still change the whole equation. Apartments.com. So the 2026 strategy is simple. Negotiate where supply is soft, relocate if the math stays broken, and don't confuse loyalty to a zip code with financial maturity. 6. Conclusion. Vote for a new identity. Let me say this as clearly as possible. You are not failing the 30% rule. The 30% rule is failing you. It was born in a different housing system, for a different purpose, in a different economy. It survived because it is easy to repeat, not because it still describes reality. And when a dead rule gets treated like timeless truth, the people crushed by modern costs start blaming themselves for not surviving antique math.